Hi, everybody, and welcome to Queers and Soaps. I'm Tommy, and tonight I'm joined by Eric, aka
Hi,
tonight Marlena instead of Angie.
I'm being stalked.
And welcome to a very special Saturday night edition of Queers and Soaps. We decided to take a break from Don't Touch My Grapes and delve into a Days of Our Lives classic storyline, The Salem Strangler, which aired
Very
from
fun.
1981 to 1982. Um, it's a little festive, because now we're entering Halloween season, a little scary. So I'll play the credits and we'll get right
Yes, it
into
is
it.
creepy.
Yeah. So we start off with Marlena having her own little radio show, like a therapy show. And I started watching Days back in 2000, and she had a radio show, and I never realized that was like a throwback to this because I didn't know my history. Did you know that?
I did. At that point, I did. I had the Days of Our Lives. I don't even know what book. 30th anniversary book, 35th, something like that, where it has the stories. That's where I found the 1977 Samantha and her one that you
Oh, the
wanted
sanitarium.
to see, and I wanted to see the twin storyline.
Cool.
Yeah. So I
Um,
did. I was aware of the radio show. Yeah.
okay. She gets a call from a man saying, "I don't want to do it. Please stop me." And then he hangs up.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't even give her a chance to help him. He's just like, "Help me, bye."
I know, right?
um, Marlena has to talk with Neil about Liz and Don, that they're planning to get married. So she actually tells him that they're planning to get married. Did you know who Neil was?
No. I think I heard of him before. It's Neil Curtis, right?
Mm-hmm. So
Neil
he's
Curtis.
he's Sarah
I
Horton's father, like her biological father.
so him and Maggie banged,
No. So
right?
you know how Maggie has like egg
Or
babies?
Sarah. Okay.
So Sarah was like an in vitro thing, but I don't think she knew who the donor was. And then we found out years later, as Maggie was starting to become romantically involved with Neil, that Neil was the father. And then he
Okay.
left the show, and then shortly after, Sarah left the show for like 30 years. Uh, came back
Yeah,
as
yeah, yeah,
the Sarah that we know. Um,
yeah.
so Maggie sits with Marlena, and Marlena tells her about the weird phone call. And Maggie wonders if it's Dawn because the caller was saying, "Stop me from doing it." And with the news that he's about to marry Liz, Maggie thinks that was him being like, "Don't let me marry her. Stop me before I go through with it."
Mm, yeah.
Um, I know you had texted me. It was nice to see Maggie and Marlena in scenes together.
Yeah, wasn't it? I thought
It
they had
was. I
really good
forgot they were good
chemistry.
friends, actually.
Yeah, I know. I kind of did too. And I was like, oh, wow, they're tight.
Right.
Marlena's always over her house and she's over there. And I'm like, oh, all right. I didn't realize
They were cheaper back then. They could afford to have them in scenes together.
that. I also feel like in these edits, I felt like they were either missing stuff or back then they didn't show things. I'm not really sure because
Yeah.
they talked about who was it? Evan. They talked about an Evan. Didn't see
Hmm.
him once
I don't know who
in the
Evan
first
is
three
at all.
episodes. No, is he there? I don't. I don't know. They're just like Evan, Evan, Evan. I'm like, I don't know this guy. I gotta look him up. I did not do my detective work.
And Marlena kept alluding that she had to take care of Johnny, like she had a son named Johnny. So I went on
Right.
Wikipedia to see if there's like a forgotten child that nobody mentions, and there's no Johnny listed. So I don't know who this Johnny is. DJ was
I thought it
was
was
the
like
child that died
once.
from SIDS.
Right.
So that
Oh,
already
okay. I
happened.
saw some of that storyline.
Yeah.
Right. That was in '79, I believe.
Yeah, that's the reason why her and Don got
Yeah.
divorced. Like it like was like the downfall of their marriage.
Yeah.
Um
Johnny. Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was like maybe Don's son. I'm not positive. I
Yeah,
don't know.
I gotta do more research.
We
It's
gotta
not
try
whoever
to
it is.
find.
It's not her
Yeah,
biological son, and it's not listed as an
right. I
adoptive
figured it
son.
probably wasn't. Right, right.
Um, so we'll have to look into that. Um,
Yeah, we'll get back to you.
so now that Maggie mentioned Dawn, it possibly being Dawn that called, Marlena can't get it out of her head, and she actually has a nightmare that it was Dawn that called. Like she sees his face on the phone. Like
Hmm.
it was
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah.
She then gets a letter in her fan mail saying basically what was said on the phone, and she notices the postage stamp is the date of the phone call. Marlena goes to see Don to kind of like see if maybe it was him,
Hmm.
and Don thinks that she's there because she found out about the wedding plans for him and Liz. She backs down and she says she's there to congratulate him. So I think this might be the beginning of them. So they're divorced, and now I think this might be the beginning of them starting to become friends again.
Right. They do seem a little awkward in scenes.
Because I've only seen like maybe the mid '80s, and at that point they were good friends. In fact, Maggie was with Don at that point.
I
um,
didn't know this stuff.
Julie is. We're probably just gonna go through a list of every character because it seems like the whole town is seeing Marlena for therapy.
Yeah, right.
But
That's what
it's
I said.
Julie's
It's
turn.
very
She's up.
busy.
um, so Julie's there seeing Marlena because she's having trouble with a teenage hope, which was not Christian Alfonso. There was another teenage hope like a year or two before her.
Right.
And Marlena thinks that she, Hope, and Doug could benefit from some group therapy, which was probably like a new novel idea back then.
Yeah.
Um, Renee seeks Marlena's advice on making her radio show a success like hers. She has a southern accent, which I don't remember Renee having. Now you know Renee, right? This is she ends up being Stefano's daughter.
I heard about Renee, and then they did that Renee storyline with Sarah, so I knew more about it
Yes.
then. I did read about it a long time ago. Yeah.
And at some point, she's romantically involved with Tony. I don't know if you've ever heard that.
Yes, because that's why it was weird with Anna when it
Yes.
happened last year. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
she says she wonders if she should cover David's trial. Now I don't know what David's trial is, but I just went with it. And Marlena thinks
Same. I
she
have
should
no
just.
idea.
Marlena thinks that she should just leave the trial to the news. Now David is David Banning. That's Eli's father. Just to give
Oh,
you a connection.
who's Julie's son?
Julie's son. Yeah.
Julie's son.
Yep. And
Okay.
Hope's
I did
half
not
brother.
know. I didn't know more than half of these people. I know
Oh.
Julie, Maggie, and I knew Don. I knew Don just from seeing him, and I saw that one storyline with the baby loss, but and that's it. But
There were name drops like really quickly, and I'm like, wait, that's important. Like I know that's somebody, and I kept like trying to connect
so
everybody.
speaking of name drops, did you hear? I heard Harold Trask in the. They were talking about a Harold Trask, like I guess he was like a DA or something. Those I think Don's the DA now, right?
Yeah.
From what we saw.
Mm-hmm.
But you know Melinda Trask.
Yes. I don't know if that's a
Apparently, that's who I
connection.
think it is. I went or just like yeah, or a freak accident. But I was like, oh, Harold Trask. I'm gonna write that down and bring that up. But I know nothing about this Harold Trask, so
Neither do
it
I.
could have just been like they linked it. Who knows?
Marie
But
Horton
she
comes
shows
to
up.
see Marlena, another member of the town, to ask her to talk to her daughter Jessica. Marlena finds Jessica,
Mm,
who's a nun, and
I was confused by that.
sees how she's dealing with her father's shooting. So Jessica is Nick Fallon's mother.
They don't call Jessica's sister Jessica, and I was confused by that because I thought back then any nun was you would say sister. You know what I mean? But nobody did. I
Maybe
was like, okay, so
she's
is she a nun or
maybe she's not a full nun
is
yet.
she
Maybe she's just
early?
like seeing if she wants to do it.
That's
Like
what I
she's
was.
like in the process of becoming a
That's what I
nun.
was thinking. Right. I was thinking
Because
that because I mean nobody's saying Sister Jessica, and I feel like that's a respect thing, and they would definitely do that back then. I would assume.
Marie was actually a nun at one point. Like I think she became a nun after she realized she was in love with her brother who had amnesia,
Yes.
Tommy.
That was in the 70s, right? Or was it in the 80s when she became a nun? You would know more than me.
I don't actually know. I'm assuming the storyline where she fell in love with Tommy, who was amnesiac and had his face reconstructed, happened in the 60s. So probably by the 70s, she became a
Oh,
nun.
okay. So
Uh,
okay. I thought it was like a mid 80s thing, but you've seen the mid 80s stuff, so that's what I mean. Like you
oh
would
yeah,
know
no,
more
no,
than
no.
me.
It's definitely at least the
Okay.
70s one. Yeah. Um, oh, so Marlena finds Jessica and see how she's doing with her father's shooting. Now her father is oh, what's his name? Oh, I can't remember. He was on The Young and the Restless in the 80s, and he was with Catherine. Um, were you watching YNR in the 80s?
I've seen 80s stuff, and I do remember a man with Catherine. I could not tell you the man's name, and it might be him.
And I know both their names, and right now I'm drawing a blank, of course, because we're live. Um, uh,
That's what happens when we're live, people.
Rex. He played Rex Sterling
Okay.
on Young and the
Oh, okay.
Restless.
I remember talking about Rex. Okay.
Yeah. So the actor that played
And
Rex
that's his
is
dad?
who that's who plays her father on
Oh, okay.
Days. Um,
Did you mention
Marlena
during the.
receives another disturbing letter, and Lee Dumond catches a glimpse of it and thinks Marlena should seek Don's help.
Now, Lee is Renee's sister. I did get that, right?
Mother? I think it's her mother.
Is it her mother?
I think so.
But she was talking that they don't get along, and then Marlena was like, "Oh, well, sisters sometimes don't get along," and I was like,
Oh, did she
"But
say sisters? So maybe.
I thought so." But then if she's a sister, wouldn't she be Stefano's too? I'm confused. I don't know.
Maybe they're halvesies.
Help us out, Jays fans.
I thought she was her mother, and I thought they weren't getting along because it's the mother daughter dynamic that they just don't get along. Um,
Um, I don't
Another thing
know.
we'll have to look up.
Yeah.
Um, Marlena doesn't want Don to know what's going on. She doesn't think it's a big issue. And Lee decides to take it upon herself to tell Don because she thinks that Marlena's life might be in danger. Marlena's producer Stuart is going over her demos and her readings and fan mail,
Oh, damn,
and
Stewart.
he
I didn't know who he was until like the second episode. I didn't know he was the radio manager.
yeah, neither did I. I'm like,
I
who is
didn't
this
get it.
Stuart? And then when she met with him, I was like, oh, he's the producer.
Yeah, I was like, okay, I get it.
He wants to find a way to get a more male audience, and she mentions that she got another letter from that weird caller. Don comes to see Marlena after hearing about the letter from Lee. And Marlena says she didn't want to bother him and she was planning on making a broadcast appeal to the caller so that they would call again so she could help them.
Right.
Lee checks in on Marlena and sees she is annoyed, but Marlena says she's not angry with her, that it was actually a very nice gesture that she cared enough to tell Don so she would be safe.
And how it's crazy how different Marlena was. I mean, she is basically a saint with everything she's dealt with. The only she acted up one time, and it was well deserved. But that's in episode 3. But I was like, wow, she's hardcore saint. Like she, like
She
everybody
was like, it
else
doesn't
has
matter that
flaws,
they're
and she's
threatening my
like,
life. I still want to help them.
I know, I gotta help them do whatever they're calling about.
Maggie is concerned about Marlena's radio show becoming too successful, that people will associate her voice with the show and she will receive more strange letters and phone calls. So I thought that was sweet.
Probably true. Right.
Um, so I just wrote his name down because this character Joshua comes to see Marlena a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And Lee apparently was throwing a party and she ran into Joshua and she said, I invited Joshua Fallon. So I went straight to Wikipedia and found out he is Nick Fallon's father. So at some point,
Ah.
him and the nun get together and they make Nick.
Jessica. Oh God.
And
Okay.
they make Nick.
Wow.
Yep.
I know Jessica came back, I think, at some point. I'm
Did
not
she?
sure if it was the same actress or not, but yeah, she came. I couldn't tell you the year. I remember reading it where she did come back and she was gone for like 20 years or something crazy. And I was like, oh, okay.
Oh,
So she was actually on. Like, I didn't know. Because we
I
didn't
don't
know this.
remember
I didn't
that.
know too much of the history.
Could it have been when Nick came to the show as a 20
Yeah, yeah,
something?
yeah. It
Oh,
was. It was when Nick came to the show. They might have
okay.
killed her off too. I can't remember. I really can't remember. I gotta look it up.
Probably. They kill all the Hortons
When you
off.
watch soaps, when you watch all the soaps, you have no idea what's happening in your head anymore. You're like, oh
Everything melds
god,
together.
it really does. It really does.
Marlena gets another creepy call saying she should have stopped him, and it's too late now. They hang up, and Marlena pleads on air for them to call back. They don't. Marlena is alone in the studio when the phone rings aggressively. Did you not think that that was a weird ring? It was very like it made me uneasy.
it it was a weird ring, and why did she take so long to answer it? I was like, if she wanted them to call back, get the goddamn phone.
It reminded me of the episode of 90210 when Brenda was volunteering at like the hotline and it was after hours and she wasn't sure if she should answer the phone.
Right. Yeah, maybe that's what it was. Yeah. I don't help.
um,
I don't help after 8 p.m.
call back during business hours.
Yeah, right.
She reluctantly answers, but whoever it was hangs up.
Of
Um,
course. It took forever.
and because that made her uneasy, she's startled by a shadow, but it's just her producer, Stuart.
God damn it, Stewart. He was everywhere scaring the shit out of her.
Do you think he was supposed to
First of all,
be good?
watching this for the first time, I'm like, they're lining the shit up out of here. They got Joshua. We're thinking it might be him, like kind of obsessing over Marlena. They're lining up Stewart, who's creeping the fuck around everywhere.
Later, Todd.
They're lining up
Okay, Todd.
they're yeah, they're lining up. They're just like getting it ready. You're just like, it's really well written. I feel like the stuff. I'm like, they're already like what's coming. I don't know.
Mhm.
Back then, they might not have known exactly what was going on,
Yeah.
but I'm just like knowing what's going to happen with this storyline. It's really cool. Like you're just like shit. I have no idea who it is right now.
Yeah, they're definitely like putting the red herrings in. Um,
And another thing I wanted to know too, like so the one woman that we got strangled, we don't know about that yet, right? That's in the second episode.
yeah, we're not up to that
I'll
yet.
wait until we get to that to talk about. I'll wait till talk about it.
I mean, obviously, we're watching clips. Um, Mostly, we're
Right.
just seeing Marlena's scene, so we're not actually seeing anybody else individually. So it's a faster pace that we're
Right.
watching. Um,
That's
but
the thing. I'm like, were we supposed to see other things with, I don't know, like a stalker around besides Stewart,
yeah, I'm sure.
working
Like,
in the shadows.
I guess we'll see once like actual characters start getting killed off. Because right now they're just saying a woman was killed. They're not giving like a name or anything.
If 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 there's any
Um,
Days watchers out there that watched in 1982, please let us know. Anything we're talking about.
help us. um,
Help us. Help me.
Marlena notices she gets the calls in the evening when she's on air. She says sometimes people feel free to do things they wouldn't do during the day. Um, she hopes whatever he has threatened to do, he hasn't already gone and done. Stewart offers to have her not do her show in the evenings, and she says she really wants to help this person. So there you go, the Saint Marlena that you were talking about.
A damn saint, like crazy saint.
Oh, and
I
we're
didn't
here
know
now.
this side of Marlena. I like what?
We're here. Marlena reads an article in the paper that a woman was strangled to death on a
Oh,
Monday evening while she was doing her show. So this is where I wondered, because they didn't name the
what they showed.
character. Is it somebody? Was it like a death off screen, and we're working up to the on screen
Right.
deaths that I hope we see, because that'll make this
That's
more creepy.
that's right. That's what I was wondering too, because it is creepy already. So they're doing a good job with the creep factor, especially with that goddamn steward on every corner, scaring the fuck out of you. And yeah, like I'm wondering, did they show like a stalker like creep and just strangle? You know, like I would think
Hmm.
they probably showed like a dark figure and just kind of
Yeah,
like, and then like cut, you know, like just to know that something's happening from this. But I honestly have no idea, you know,
yeah.
'cause we get what we get.
Marlena goes to the gym, and I put the workout equipment she's on looks like she's sitting in a doctor's chair, like an old fashioned doctor's chair.
I don't even
Um,
remember being at the gym, so maybe I did think it was a gym.
I think I was taking notes at this time, so I was half listening, but it looked like Marlena was a little bit angry, and it may have been Don and Liz's wedding day, and she was just like frustrated and taking it out and like screaming, like just had a short fuse that night.
Saint Marlena doesn't get frustrated. She just has weirdo fantasies and dreams
Here's
to
voices in
counter
her head.
frustration. Yeah,
Um,
that's what I got from it.
Don has Marlena's phone tapped at the um, in case the caller calls again. She needs to keep him on the phone line for 60 seconds so they can trace it. Marlene is conflicted at first if she wants to do this because she feels like she's betraying the patient's trust. Um, she's doing her radio show with Don watching, and she hits the trace button because the caller calls in. She asks the caller what he wants them to stop them from, and he says it's too late. Somebody has to pay, and he hangs up. It was just under a minute, so they couldn't trace the call.
Yeah,
Don wonders if the caller will call back, and Marlena says he never calls back in the same night.
yeah, she knows him. And that's another thing that was happening too. So she said like a couple times I got like, oh, that was a few days ago. That was like a week ago. I'm like, so did they skip time or were we like you said we're just seeing these scenes? So
Things were a
all
lot
that
slower paced
ass.
back then, so I think it's just that we're seeing clips, and they probably actually were weeks ago and days ago. Um,
Right. That's what I'm wondering.
so I'm like, oh, well, thank God we're watching clips because I couldn't wait weeks just to like find out about one phone call.
I would love to see this whole story play out because I feel like we are only seeing like one side of the story. So like remember didn't they go to a party at some point? I'm like, did they show the party? Like, you know, I don't we don't
Yeah,
know.
the party that
What
Lee was
was shown
throwing
what wasn't.
that she invited Joshua to. Yeah.
Right.
Um, sorry, I'm lost in my notes.
And
Don takes Marlena home to make sure she's safe, and Don is sorry that they couldn't catch the guy. Marlena says next time, and Don is surprised that she wants to try again.
yeah.
Mar- Marlena's home and a little bit jumpy, thinking about the caller. She keeps hearing the call saying, "You should have stopped me. You should have stopped me." There's a knock at her door, and it's Joshua. So I'm like, "Oh, red herring, red herring, red herring."
Mm-hmm.
And Marlena receives another alarming letter. Don calls Marlena during a session she's having with Lee and says he wants to set up the next time they can try and trace the caller. She wonders what's wrong, and he has to see her that afternoon. He meets up with her, and he's being very gloomy, as Marlena would say, and she suspects there was another murder. Don confirms there was, and Marlena asks if he thinks it was the same man, and he says yes. She blames herself for not stopping this from happening.
Because she knew it was going to happen.
Right.
She couldn't keep the guy on the phone for 60 seconds. Like, clearly,
Let alone stop him from
like,
murdering
what can you
people.
do? For being
Um,
such a smart doctor and helping the whole town, like, I'm like, really? Like, would you really blame yourself for not being able to help? Like, come on, lady. Like,
um,
what could you have done? You can't, you know what I mean?
to put a pause on these letters and phone calls, just to like wrap something else that was kind of weaved in, it seems like there was some surrogacy storyline going on, like a surrogate program that Maggie
With
was involved
Maggie,
in.
right?
And Maggie was
Yeah,
apparently
yeah.
pregnant and thought she was going to lose the baby, but then she didn't. There was like a sweet
Right.
hospital scene with Marlena at her bedside, telling her like they have to think positively, and her hair was styled a little bit
I
differently. And I
thought,
was like, Deirdre, you look really pretty.
yeah, yeah. I thought she was pregnant with Sarah at that time. But now you told me who the parents were. So that's like, who is this child with who she's pregnant? Or maybe she doesn't have the child. I don't know how
Well,
it ends up, but
Mickey is sterile, so this is a surrogate thing, like or an in vitro thing. So that could be Sarah
oh, so it could be Sarah if
because
she
Melissa's
the
adopted.
baby makes it, which we might not see the end of this storyline unless it plays out in 1983.
Yeah, maybe. um, where am I? Oh, Marlena shows Don her most recent letter that says, "It's your fault. I wouldn't have done it if you had stopped me. Why didn't you stop me?"
So weird.
So just to add on to her guilt that it's her fault.
Right.
Um, Marlena and Joshua are at the radio studio. She says she wants to help the man, and he says, has she considered it could have an opposite effect if she gets more involved with this person? He tells her to remember she's not dealing with an ordinary patient, that she's dealing with a killer. She says, a maybe killer.
Yeah.
He goes to leave knowing Don will be there soon. She says Don has assigned a policeman to watch over her. Now, here I thought we were going to see Roman for the first time because I know he comes at some point in this story to like watch her or like help her. So I thought we
Roman
were
was
going to like
on
see him.
since nine. Right, and Roman was on in 1981.
Yeah,
So I was confused too as to where he was.
I think he's
So we
coming
didn't
soon.
know, you know, he
Yeah, I
has
think
to.
he's coming soon
Because
because
it's part of the storyline. He's a
yeah,
big part of the storyline,
yeah.
from what I read.
Um, she thinks that it's fine as long as the policeman keeps his distance. She doesn't really like somebody hovering over her. And Joshua says he'll come by her place after the show to check on her. Marlena tells Dawn she doesn't think the man is trying to hurt her. She thinks that he's trying to get help. She starts her show, and Dawn stays and watches. And she gets like a caller from. It's not the killer that calls, but she gets a patient that calls that's separated from his wife and in love with another woman, but feels like he can't move on because he's still somehow attached to his soon to be ex wife. And I guess it kind of is mirroring what's happening with Don and Marlena and Liz because Don clearly still cares about Marlena, but he's in love with Liz. So it was like this whole like parallel that I think they were trying to show.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Marlena is now home alone, and there's a knock at the door. She thinks maybe it's Joshua who had come to check on her, and maybe he forgot something.
Nobody leaves
And
Marlena alone.
we see a man creeping by the door, and I'm like, who is this? And I'm like, they're showing his face. I know who the killer is, and that's not the killer. So who is this man?
Right, right.
Um,
Was that Todd?
that was Todd. It's Todd Chandler. So I went to Wikipedia. He is Liz's half brother.
Yes. I figured. Okay, I wasn't sure if it was half, but I did figure it out. Why? What happens?
Yeah. He says he wants her help to stop him from destroying his life. He says if he hasn't already. So red herring, red herring. He may have done something that ruined his life. He's angry because he thinks Marlena doesn't want to help him and is pushing him aside like she did his father, which led to his death. He storms
Who
off.
was his father? Do we know?
Mm, we I don't actually know a lot about his father, but we learned something later that I thought was very interesting.
Right.
Um,
Right. Same.
he storms off, and just as he leaves, Don calls and hears that Marlena is upset, and he comes to her apartment to check on her. Marlena says she can't talk about what happened because Todd is her patient. So she's really doubling down on this doctor patient confidentiality. She gets a little looser with that over the
Very.
decades.
Very. In the last 20 years, for sure.
um, she calms down and he leaves, and Marlena wonders if maybe Todd is the caller because she starts hearing that you should have stopped me, you should have stopped me in her head. So Liz pays Marlena a visit late at night, and she accuses Marlena of wanting Dawn back. She says
Yeah.
now she's using her brother Todd as an instrument, just like she used her father. And Marlena almost calls her a bitch.
Sure does.
I was like, ooh, were they allowed to say bitch in 1981?
Yeah. I know.
She's like, you.
That was, yeah. That was a good fight, though. What else did Liz say?
um, Marlena then says that your father raped me. Now I knew Marlena had been raped. I didn't know that it was Liz's father though.
Maybe. Now I gotta find out Liz's father more about him because I don't know anything about him. I don't think. I might.
Um, Liz says maybe she should try calling the police instead of her husband.
He says he belongs to me. He's my property. Something along those lines. Was like, what the fuck, me?
um, and then next day, Don, or a week, who knows when it is, Don supervises another uneventful radio show, and the caller doesn't call. Marlena goes home, and while she's at her door, a shadowy figure approaches her, which alarms her, and that's where we left off.
Yeah, that's how it ended, right? For some reason, I
So,
didn't write that. I just had Marlena kicks her out, and that was all. I was probably writing when that happened. I was like, yeah, yeah. It's probably stupid again. God damn it.
I'm gonna speculate that it's Roman. I might be right. I might be wrong. I don't know.
Oh, maybe that's a good one. And he's there. He's
All right. Well, we're gonna wrap this up because we're
gonna
having
travel
technical
and
difficulties this evening before anything else happens. So thank you for joining us for another episode of Queers and Soaps and joining us on our first episode of the Salem Strangler. We will be back very soon
bye.
with part two. And until next time, have a great night, guys, girls, whoever's watching this, whenever you're
Good night,
watching this.
everyone.
Bye.